first of all, welcome everyone who's joined so far. You're all very welcome to this live event today, where we'll be speaking about how you can use guest feedback to drive satisfaction and revenue. So I'm joined by two incredible guests. I'm very excited to have them join me today, and we'll dive into a little bit about introducing them. So what we're basically going to look at today is how we can analyze the growing importance of feedback in the hospitality industry, how analyzing that feedback and acting on that feedback can lead to an increase in guest satisfaction, and also how you can use that to improve your guest experience. And then we're going to kind of make this a full circle moment where we speak about how you can capitalize on that improved satisfaction to in turn drive revenue for your business. After that, we'll just have some very quick closing thoughts, and we will be able to complete that circle about how you take the feedback and drive revenue from it. So without further ado, I would like to dive into introducing our wonderful guests for today. First up, we have somebody I am very excited to announce, which is Rita Varga. How are you doing, Rita? Are you good?
I'm great. Excited about the next minutes and the discussion.
Awesome. Rita is the CEO of Rise Up, the founder of Hera by Hotel Resbat. Of course, as you can see from the background, incredible experience in the tech, travel and hospitality industry. You have many specializations, Rita, over the last couple of years. Is there anything you'd like to say about that? Like why you love it so much, why you're passionate about what you do?
I accidentally got into the tech space about 14 years ago through an online travel agency based in Barcelona. And ever since, I've been in love with tech. I think tech has so much to offer to simplify your life. I think tech is sexy. You should use it. It absolutely won't take away your job. It will improve your job. So I'm here to tell all about that.
Amazing. Thank you so much. What a great intro. I've also mentioned here that you're the creator of the Revenue Leadership Program. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that, just very quickly as an intro?
Yes. So on the 1st of October, we are launching an 8-week program dedicated to commercial and revenue leaders across the globe, because it's an online program. And during these 8 weeks, we are hosting different lectures, master classes, case studies, hackathons across 4 verticals. AI and innovation is one of them, total revenue management, digital marketing, and distribution, and of course leadership, which is a big part of the industry's development right now.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you.
Please join vriseup.com.
Definitely, 100%. Thank you so much. And we want to move on to our very next guest, who is also a very incredible person that we are very happy to have with us today. This is Mr. Josh Liebman. How are you doing, Josh? Are you good? Very welcome.
I'm doing great, Adam. Really excited to be here.
Awesome. So you are the founder of the Liebman Leisure Group and the author of an incredible book called The Hospitality Mentality. Just before we look at the background aspect, can you summarize what is the hospitality mentality for you?
Well, if I were to do that in 1 or 2 sentences, I would say it's where you recognize that your guests don't need you. They could be doing anything else aside from visiting you or doing business with you. And your actions show that you recognize those first 2 components.
That's absolutely incredible. Thank you so much. And when we look at the background aspects here, you're also the co-host of the AttractionPros Podcast. I was watching some clips on YouTube. You must have already interviewed hundreds of business owners across the US. Is that correct? Would you say that?
Yeah, we looked at it a few days ago. Out of the 365 episodes we have, I think more than 250 of them are interviews with leaders, executives, and influencers, specifically within the attraction space. So our focus is in theme and amusement parks, water parks, cultural tourism, so zoos, museums, aquariums, family entertainment center, from the operator and supplier side of the business.
Okay, awesome. It's really super interesting, and your videos on YouTube are also really engaging. I've seen a few in anticipation of this event as well. And just on the second point here, you've consulted for some world-leading hospitality brands like the Ritz, Carlton, Four Seasons, and Walt Disney World, which speaks very much to me. Is there anything you'd like to say about that, working with such large businesses and brands?
Yeah, Absolutely. So it's given me a really unique perspective. So from an employment standpoint, I've had the opportunity to work directly for Disney and for some of the top theme park operators, Universal, Merlin Entertainment, Cedar Fair, and then when I went into consulting, it was originally with luxury hotels and resorts. So that's when I was introduced to Ritz, Carlton, and Waldorf Astoria, and Four Seasons, and many of the top tier lodging brands. And it's just amazing to see the focus on creating an amazing guest experience from a hospitality standpoint, but how that also links back to the business objectives as well.
Awesome. That's amazing. Thank you. And very recently, you've just announced a service recovery hero course. Do you want to just give us like a very quick introduction as to what that is and when it's upcoming?
Yeah, absolutely. So the target launch date is sometime this fall. I don't have the exact date yet because I'm in the post-production phase, but it's been really exciting to create. After leading guest experience workshops for about a decade or so and covering all areas of guest experience, the biggest topic that comes up that sparks the most discussion in the room, whether it's new hire or frontline team members who are just starting their first job, all the way to executive leadership, is on the topic of service recovery. So it's usually where I always have to cut off the conversation because we're running out of time. So I figure let's just take everything related to service recovery and complaint resolution, put it into a self-paced online course that I've recorded, and I'm working on the post-production aspects of it right now. And it's about really crafting your service recovery strategy, recognizing that guest complaints are part of standard operation. So complaint resolution should be standard operating procedures.
Definitely. 100%. And that actually leads very, very nicely this aspect of, analyzing customer complaints and using that to fuel decision-making and guest experience improvements leads very, very nicely into the first topic we want to speak about today, which is the growing importance of guest feedback. And I've put growing here because you would assume that guest feedback has always been important. In fact, it has always been important. But what trends we see over the last couple of years is that this importance is growing, and not just growing marginally, growing massively. And we see this represented through some data trends. So just for source relation, this is from Cornell's Hospitality Quarterly and supported by Del White. I have mentioned to both of you before this meeting and showed you these statistics because it's actually quite stark. So what we're seeing here is that over the last, let's say, 9 or 10 years, we're seeing that the increase of hospitality businesses who actively collect and monitor feedback has increased from 50% in around about 2014 to now just under 90% as recent as 2023. So we're basically seeing this huge increase in hospitality businesses moving towards being more proactive in how they approach feedback collection and feedback analysis. And the first question I'll ask both of you, but maybe we can just go to Rita here first. Why do you think that this trend has been happening in the hospitality industry especially? Do you think it's related to improvements in tech, accessibility for digitalization, more competition? Do you have any thoughts on that?
All the above. I think, and let me start with the technology point of view. There are different technologies that can actually measure, analyze, and give actionable data points about the guest experience. So when Josh is going to talk about how to take backlash or how to take different reviews, we actually now have and also should have the capability to collect data points on guest feedback through different technologies, as well as the science itself of using data analytics as a tool for business improvement. And it's a crucial part of any business planning, not only analyzing the past, because you would be thinking sometimes, okay, I'm collecting guest feedback to see what past stays or people that have already left the property were thinking. But it's actually very much looking ahead. How should I shape my strategy? How should I plan the year ahead? And now it's the best time to talk about business planning because budgeting season is coming up. Yeah. So it is a big part of the strategy, as well as there is larger competition. So you have to know what actually works on your property, what doesn't work on your property, what works against your competition, quote unquote, as well as seeing for example, how should you structure your room, your services? We're going to talk about your teams. So both internal and external aspects of the business.
Yeah, 100%. And I think very valid points. And I think that this competition aspect is also very valid in the sense that if more and more competitors are analyzing and collecting feedback, then you need to be on this train to basically achieve these marginal gains. And on that same question, Josh, as well, do you also agree with those points? Do you see any other trends or reasons why, any reasons why this trend is happening over the last few years?
Yeah, I agree 100% with everything that Rita said. And really, if you look at the data, and this goes back to 2014, and even if we were to think about just the last couple of decades or so, your channels for collecting guest feedback have grown substantially. Yeah. So the guest feedback has always been there. But if you think of in the before times, whatever date or year you want to put in there, you'd be in a hotel room and there'd be the comment card with the little golf pencil and saying, please tell us your thoughts. That has been not only digitized, but really scaled to the point of saying, well, now there's a lot of other opportunities and touch points to be able to collect guest feedback. And many of the traditional maybe exit surveys still work, or focus groups, or pulling people aside and asking them questions. Those are still valid. Those are still there today. But you don't need to have that intensive of an effort to be able to put a system in place for regularly collecting guest feedback, both from an internal standpoint as well as just all of the other channels. Of course, I don't need to talk about all the different channels on social media and online reviews that exist. We all know that. But if we think of in the early 2000s, or even prior to that, those didn't exist. So the guest feedback either came from the guest telling the operator directly, or it was through the network of direct referrals of friends and family, which of course are still very valid today, but there are so many other channels as well.
100%. Yeah. Really, really interesting points. The channels is something that I hadn't even mentioned at this point, and it's actually really interesting that you brought it up. And actually staying kind of with you, Josh, for this next question. As I mentioned in that guest introduction section, you've worked with some pretty world-renowned brands over the last few years and throughout your career. Are you able to give us any insights into how they have changed their approach? So obviously, we've mentioned about the digitalization aspect, the competition aspect. Have you seen that play out, as in from start to finish, how these larger brands have really changed how they visualize feedback and things like this?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, those who are not actively collecting and measuring guest feedback, they're still getting the guest feedback, but it's passive, and it's only on social media. It's only on online reviews. Those who are actively being very proactive about it and getting in front of it are focusing heavily on the internal feedback channels, because they're able to control that flow a lot better, and they're able to use that to help amplify their online reputation. So I've always said that, like I mentioned earlier, that guest complaints are part of standard operations. And when talking about the service recovery portion or course, as it relates to guest feedback, you want to be actively extracting complaints from your guests through internal channels and get to those guests and recover from those before you're learning about them from Google reviews or from TripAdvisor or from Facebook or from Yelp or from any of those online sources. Yeah. One negative review, this is the recent data that I saw, can turn away up to 30 prospective guests. So take that, multiply it by your per cap or by your RevPAR, and then that's your cost of a negative experience that you didn't get to first. So by focusing on internal feedback and collecting all of those complaints ahead of time, you're able to recover from those. And then the online reviews could be talking about the recovery, could be saying, yes, this issue happened, but they were able to resolve it. And if that review has 5 stars on it, even if it mentions the complaint, that's still a 5-star review that amplifies and enhances your reputation.
That is
if I may raise my hand.
Yeah.
So there is, just to add, there is this psychological aspect to it. So we recently spoke with the chain of luxury properties about where the human ends in guest experience and where the technology starts. And actually where, again, the human element, why is the guest is on property and you are trying to control and trying to collect the feedback via human channels, via their reception or housekeepers, any operative workers on the spot. The humans are structured to actually smile in front of you and say everything is fine, and then go to the digital channel and leave the review. And we have to make sure that this happens before the guest actually leaves the property, and we don't find that review online once they already departed and nothing can be fixed anymore.
Very, very true point. And actually on that as well, I found what's quite interesting, and it's something that I wanted to pose to you as a follow-up question to that, Rita. I think it plays in a lot with this aspect of how you basically handle internal reviews, internal feedback, and how you basically use that to fuel the aspect of teams and things like this, right? So as I mentioned again at the beginning in the guest introduction, at the moment with Rise Up, you're focusing on scaling lots of diverse teams within the hospitality industry, travel and tech industry. Do you also see these same aspects play out in how you build team culture and how you scale teams in terms of, taking that feedback in, especially like, for example, as Josh had mentioned, complaints and things like this, and utilizing that to, let's say, create a culture within a team in the hospitality industry? Do you think that this also maps within team building as well?
Yes, actually, there is a big keyword that should be adopted. More than transparency across the organization, I think it's more important effective accountability on an individual level as well as on a team level. So sharing different feedbacks and sharing feedback, even though it can be a negative aspect, it is very much constructive, both for the internal structure as well as the external structure. Internal structure, I mean, we can see what are the challenges within the organization that we can address, operational workflows, intercommunication between departments. You sell something, then the reality is something different, so that aligns in overall. Encouraging teams to actually get feedback and discuss the feedback collectively. So there are a lot of understandings that you can get, and based on that get goals and get some sort of problem solving capabilities once you take accountability for what is happening on your property. And of course, I have to go back to the beginning of our conversation. There are real data points that you can get out of it. So that can be addressed across the organization, wherever you stand, even if you don't have a guest-facing role.
Absolutely. And that's super interesting point you mentioned as well about so many different data points that you can collect. It's not just this initial face-to-face feedback. It's not only digital feedback. There's many touch points along the journey of both a guest and even from a, let's say, employee that you can collect feedback along the way. And I think that this actually is one aspect of collecting feedback, but then I suppose we move into the aspect of analyzing that feedback, right? So as in, yes, we've collected it now from multiple channels, both digitally, non-digitally, and we now need to try and see, like, how do we analyze that feedback and how do we increase the guest satisfaction, whether that's from improving the guest experience, whether that's through using both negative and positive feedback to fuel culture creation on teams that then flows down through more like the hospitality mentality aspect you had mentioned, Josh, where it needs to live throughout the entire business, right? And let's speak a little bit about the impacts of actually analyzing and acting on feedback, right? And so again, we have some pretty stacked data. And what we see is that companies that have adopted feedback collection and analysis have reported increases in NPS, so Net Promoter Score, right? And this increase is actually increasing. So the idea is that between 2016 and 2019, we've seen that you can have around 10 to 15% Net Promoter Score for businesses who say we actively collect and act on feedback. But that has actually increased. So between 2020 and 2023, these same businesses have reported that when they act and analyze feedback and use this to fuel their decision making and how they create a guest experience, they're reporting anywhere up to a 17% on average Net Promoter Score, right? And what you can see on the orange line at the bottom, which is something that I would more so focus on in our next section, but it's still relevant for what we're looking at here, is that this increase in NPS has led to a clear impact on returning guests, which plays into this aspect of improving the guest experience from top to bottom, means that guests are happier to return. And I want to kind of start off by posing something to you, Josh, if that's okay. when you are trying to take feedback, whether it's positive or negative, you're analyzing it. What kind of patterns, data points, metrics are you looking for? Like, what are you really looking for to jump on as, like, let's say, a starting point?
Yeah. So I'll say a few kind of key points on this. The first part is about aggregating that feedback so you can look at it over specific blocks of time. So that if you were to say, okay, this is our feedback for August, this is how it compares to July, then you've got an apples to apples benchmark, or August of last year, right? So you can look at it in a few different dimensions. You can look at it whether it's, monthly, weekly, quarterly, the aggregation part of it is very important. So you can really consolidate it and say, you can really understand the time periods. This is our peak season. This is our off peak season. Once you have that in place, then the patterns you want to look for are, what are the top concerns that are coming up? But not just saying these are the top complaints that we got and we're going to resolve the complaints. It's about really pulling back and saying, why do these complaints exist? Meaning, what is the perception? Because everything we're doing in guest experience, we're looking at data right here that is based off of feelings, that is based off of subjective opinions, and we're trying to convert it into these metrics that are truly actionable. So we need to pull back and say, okay, well, what led to those subjective feelings that made the guest complain about XYZ? And then you solve for the perception, not the complaint itself, recognizing that the solution is not the opposite of the problem. One quick example that happens in the hotel industry from time to time, particularly older properties, or maybe those that have expanded a bit and have kind of outgrown maybe their infrastructure, is a complaint about wait times for elevators. So elevators are too slow. Well, what's the opposite of the problem? Make the elevators faster. That's probably not the solution, right? Or add more elevator, cabs within that's, those are large CapEx, projects that are certainly doable, but what can we do today immediately? So one thing many hotels have done is they put mirrors in the elevator waiting areas. So you go up, you push the button for the elevator, and as you're waiting, you look in the mirror, and we're all just looking at ourselves, right? And then the elevator comes, you hear the ding, and then you go in, right? So it's solved for the perception. When they do that, the amount of complaints about wait times for elevators dropped. They didn't change the wait time. They didn't change the speed. They changed the perception and gave you something else to focus on, rather than, wow, I'm waiting a long time for the elevator.
That's a pretty incredible story and such a good solution. And I think that aspect you've mentioned of that the solution is not the opposite of the problem is actually really, really interesting. It's something that I myself hadn't even kind of thought about up until this point. So it's interesting you've mentioned that. And do you have anything like to add to that, Rita, in terms of, do you see the kind of value in analyzing feedback for refining strategical aspects as well? So when you're looking at trying to build a revenue strategy for your hospitality business, do you see those same aspects that Josh has mentioned, where it's not always necessarily about reacting directly to a specific complaint? It's about taking a step back and seeing, what's the perception? How can I build a strategy that solves this in the long term, how people kind of perceive the business?
Yeah, so I think I let me take 2 steps back, because in order to have the right guests in your property to make, and your job is to make them happy and satisfied, you have to target the right type of guests as well. And I think this helps in strategical planning, finding through the reviews and finding the right channels, the right target group, the right segment through these feedbacks. And that's a very strategical, very analytical job, very satisfying job as well, as we see. And just taking 2 steps back, it's very much part of the planning. It's very much part of addressing from a pricing point of view, even from an attributes point of view. For example, we work with a company called Expect Me, which is a Belgium startup for room allocation. And basically, we really see with some of the guests, through some of the guest reviews, that they provide room selection upon the booking journey, so that you select your room based on your attributes. Okay. So it is addressing the elephant in the room before the elephant is actually in the room. Keep the responsibility, just to continue on Josh's line. It's basically giving the power, empowering your guest to choose their journey. So afterwards, you don't have to handle those challenges. It's understanding the needs of several segments, understanding the channels, because you are always looking for the direct bookings and the returning guests, and that's all nice. But I still believe in the billboard effect, but the billboard effect has to be strategical as well. So choosing the right distribution channels. We think guest satisfaction is so small. It's actually so big.
100%. Yeah. And I think that you also see, like, I know I mentioned it earlier, but how much bigger it's getting, right? So it's covering so many different aspects. And I mean, it's not just in the hospitality industry, but this is obviously what we're focusing on today. But I think what's really interesting is something you had mentioned there about, yes, returning guests is obviously great. And you see this data here that shows that, there's a kind of a correlation between this. But like analyzing feedback to basically improve your guest experience and drive guest satisfaction is not just about making those same guests return. It's also about how do you put that out there. Like, I think that's what you mentioned with the billboard effect. So how can you put that out there to get new guests, basically? And that also plays back to what you had mentioned, Josh, earlier around, one negative review could maybe even turn 30 potential guests or customers away. And I think it all plays in together, that focusing on so many different aspects, so many different channels, can basically increase this kind of experience across the board, whether that's how you target potential guests, how you advertise your business, and things like that. And I think this leads very, very nicely into the kind of round off of what this whole kind of event or this kind of call together is about, which is you collect feedback. Okay, more businesses are actively doing this. You analyze the feedback. Okay, that can mean multiple different things, different areas, different channels. That's about changing perception. It's about how you drive targeting. But the big question is, how do you capitalize on improved satisfaction? So let's say you've done everything right up until this point, or as right as you possibly can. So you found maybe some key areas you can improve, aspects of your business, the experience, and you're seeing the fruits of this labor, right? So you're seeing improved review scores, you're seeing better feedback, you're turning maybe 2 or 3 star reviews into 4 or 5 star reviews, so on and so forth. How do you ensure that this doesn't only just lead to returning guests, it also leads to new guests and maybe business development and business growth? And before I kind of throw out this final section questions to both of you, I wanted to speak a little bit about some data points. And I think that this is pretty incredible data to see. So these 3 points I have on the left side are just different statistics I've been able to pull together from different sources that speak about how even very, very minor increases in net promoter score can lead to pretty substantial increases in revenue. But what I kind of want to focus on a lot is if you look at the graph on the right-hand side. So from 2018 to around 2020, a 1-point increase in NPS was giving you kind of around about a 1.3% increase in revenue, let's say RevPAR. But since 2020, so over the last, let's say 3 or 4 years, this has actually continued to grow. So that same 1-point increase in NPS score is now able to give you a 1.8% increase in revenue per available room. So this is a really, really interesting data point, and it basically plays into the concept that if you start to analyze feedback, if you start to act on that feedback, and you start to get this improved experience and satisfaction from your guests, you can use that to drive revenue. And so what I wanted to ask you both about, and maybe just throw it over to you first, Rita, is considering your experience within the business development world, and again, the scaling of teams aspect, but more so focused on the revenue generation here. How have you seen, like maybe 1 or 2 examples of guest satisfaction improvements directly impacting revenue growth?
So addressing the right product to the right audience, to the right price, through the right placement is always a revenue driver. And you can see through that strategical approach how you can then take advantage of different revenue strategies. Now, one good old direct impact is statistically, and I need to pull this up, there is actually a 5 to 25% increase on revenue if you are able to really capture and find that do that fine tuning.
Yeah.
And it can basically, I haven't talked about this, so let me jump on this. Diversifying teams and diversifying the industry does not only work on for your team through guest satisfaction. You are also able to diversify your guests.
Yeah.
I spoke about the channels and the strategy and blah, blah, blah. But some of pulling in some new segments, new guest acquisition. For example, people with wheelchair disabilities. This is a big topic now in the travel industry. So approximately 75% of the people around the world have some sort of disability. And 12% of the population is wheelchair bound. So that represents a significant revenue stream. If based on guest satisfaction, based on feedback, and I have to name an organization that I love, which is an OTA called Wheel the World. If you are able to address and captivate new revenue streams, and then get based on the feedbacks that your travelers give you, and you are able to do those adjustments, you are able to tap in to new revenue streams. And actually, you are creating a huge competitive advantage as well for yourself, because probably your competitors are not aware of those groups, those different new segments. And this is instant. You sign up to a new OTA because you want to create that. You get that satisfaction. You adjust your operations. You adjust a couple of things within your establishment, and then you are good to go.
That's an incredibly interesting point, actually, about thinking a little bit broader in how you structure your business and how open that business is to different segments within the industry, and how that can lead as well to, I suppose, having a broader potential group of guests that will enhance the satisfaction and experience, be more open and inclusive, and how that can basically lead in the long term to like a better experience and drive revenue. Actually, a very interesting point that I had never thought about, and thank you so much for bringing it, because it's very relevant to what we had mentioned at the start about this kind of scaling within scaling diversity within the business. And on that as well, I wanted to actually dive deeper into something that's also very relevant to you, Josh, which is, and I know that I don't know if you want to talk about this, but I wanted to play a little bit on your AttractionPros podcast and ask you a quick question about that, if that's okay. Because you've spoken with quite a lot of, as you mentioned, C-level business owners, thought leaders within the attraction and resort and theme park industry. And I was wondering if you had any insights into how they capitalize on improved satisfaction to drive repeat visitors. You gave us like a hotel example, but do you have any idea, I'm sure you have an idea, but could you share an idea with us about how those attraction-based businesses try to, let's say, improve their experience to drive revenue? And just as an example, I had seen one of your videos where it was like a theme park owner, and he had mentioned that he had, I think, opened a restaurant within the theme park to make sure that when people came there, they had like a better experience of, eating there, and it was kind of more of a family-based idea. So something along those lines, just to give us more insight into that capitalization aspect.
Sure. Yeah. So that example was Tim Murphy, CEO of Boomers Parks, who invested heavily in the food and beverage program within a family entertainment center that traditionally, when you think of family entertainment centers, you're usually thinking of the staples of pizza and chicken fingers and fries, at least in the US. I'm not sure about globally, but he was able to really modify that to say, no, we're going to offer a much better food and beverage experience that not only increased their per cap on the restaurant side, but also they were staying longer and participating in more attractions. And so it lifted the entire business and all revenue generating departments. I will also expand on that and talk about, using satisfaction to drive revenue as well, is that satisfaction alone will not bring guests back. We need to think about, when you think about all of your competitors, make sure you're thinking of indifference being as one of the competitors. Think about your own habits. Think about a restaurant that you've gone to that you had an amazing experience. The food was great. The service was great. The ambiance was great. Everything about it was perfect. And you haven't gone back yet. Not because of any bad reason, but simply because you were indifferent to it. So part of it is giving the guest that reason to come back. Part of that is saying, tell them what they can't do today. And that doesn't need to be that something is malfunctioning or inoperable or unavailable or shut down. It can be in some aspects, but that leads more into the service failure component. But if there is something new that's coming in the future. So in the attractions industry, it's very important to continue investing in new attractions and new experiences to keep people coming back. But it doesn't need to be those multi-million-dollar, level investments or those very, high-ticket costs. It can be about implementing those seasonal events that come in. So we're at the beginning of September. The destination theme parks in Central Florida are already starting their Halloween season, right? So this is when kids have just gone back to school. So that's when things taper off. Now a lot of people are coming back for a very different experience. Part of it could also be enhancements or modifications to certain elements of your business. Or at the core level, it could be, we have this specific discount on Wednesday. So if you're there on a Tuesday, then now there's a reason to come back the next day. And that needs to be aligned with the satisfaction. So as far as using satisfaction to drive revenue and drive repeat visitation, you need to harness that satisfaction and really start putting it to work towards giving the guest that reason to come back and not assuming that a satisfied guest will automatically come back and spend more money.
That's an incredibly interesting point as well, is that satisfaction isn't always enough to drive these repeat guests or these repeat customers. And it's also an interesting point you'd mentioned about the Tim Murphy aspect, where he's developing things over the last couple of years that mean if you have been there before, there's a reason to come back because it's maybe even better now, or the experiences of a higher quality now based on this capitalization on satisfaction. So what I'd love to do is, from my side, I would love to keep talking for the rest of the evening. I know you're both quite busy, but for the last 5 minutes, I would just love to quickly open it up to some closing thoughts. I'll first of all say thank you very much for joining us today. Basically, I've been preparing for a few weeks for this conversation with both of you because, as we've proven throughout the last 45 minutes, you both have incredibly unique outlooks on the hospitality industry, on feedback, and on revenue generation. So I just wanted to ask you guys, maybe starting with Rita, do you have any final thoughts? Do you think that this picture we've painted over the last 45 minutes makes sense?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I hope so. I think, I think guest feedback has a bigger impact on both on the internal and external level than we would think. And although Josh said, and it was very viable, that it's based on feelings and it's based on something intangible, but it's also, and guest experience is also something very unique and very personal, yet you are able to define common patterns. And the technology is just helping you finding those common patterns, whether you are looking in the past, present, or the future.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And Josh, I would give it over to you as well, just for any final thoughts. Is there anything you'd like to add in relation to what we had spoken about that journey from the first piece of feedback you pay attention to all the way towards that grind to make it a better guest experience in the long term?
Sure. So in the attractions industry and in tourism and in all areas of hospitality, we often hear the saying that we strive to create experiences that lead to lasting memories or memories that last a lifetime. And it's a really nice, warm, fuzzy, soft statement that I think can be very driving and very motivational. It's also the business model. So like Rita, you just said that the experience is intangible. It's also very finite and it's perishable. So from the time that whether it's a day at a theme park or a night in a hotel or an hour to an hour and a half in a restaurant, that may be, the experience then ends. What you are left with is the memory. That memory then leads to the action that guest takes. And the action that the guest takes is how are they going to share the experience with others? So whether it is directly with their friends and family of, let me tell you about this great restaurant that I just went to and here's all the reasons why, or posting that online review, or that negative comment that might come in internally or externally, your feedback strategy and your guest experience strategy are 100% aligned. So is it marketing? Yes. Is it operations? Yes. It touches every single department, and a guest feedback strategy is a reflection of what the experience is like on site and the way that guests are perceiving how that experience met their very high expectation. So focus on creating those memories. Yes, because it's a great thing to do and it makes us feel great. And because that also is how we measure the success of the business as well.
Yeah, incredible. Incredible. Thanks very much, Josh. And thanks again to both of you for joining me today and helping me to paint this picture. I definitely could not have done it without you. I came at some very basic data points, which showed some trends, but you have really helped me to flesh that out and create a beautiful picture. So I would also say thank you very much. Yes, we can continue the conversation as well at the Rise Up Revenue Leadership Program. I forgot to mention that. And of course, you can always check out...
Just an invitation, Josh, another.
We should definitely dive into it. And again, thank you very much. It was an absolute pleasure to finally get to speak to you both. And hopefully the three of us can continue the conversation in the future. And thank you very much to everyone who joined us today. I will be able to reshare this webinar very soon with you all online. And for that, have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.
Thank you both. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, guys.